Maharashtra is seen, and of course, every state chief minister would be most likely to say that their state is one of the best states in the country. But traditionally, Maharashtra was seen as a more developed state industrially, a more urbanized state as far as other states compared to Maharashtra are concerned. Probably in the last 10 years or so, Maharashtra was seen as losing out to its neighboring state of Gujarat in the last 10 years or so. And one of the anxieties in Maharashtra, therefore, have been about this loss of the rapid economic development and industrial development of the state in the last 10 years. In fact, one of the themes in the last elections conducted in October was this loss of premier position of the state of Maharashtra compared to maybe Gujarat, maybe some other states also. Finally then, as we turn to the politics of Maharashtra, 2-3 things keep recurring in the state's political domain. One is the issue of Mumbai, Bombay, which is also seen as the financial capital of the country, financial hub, and therefore the control over the city of Mumbai and its economy is one of the more contentious issues in the politics of Maharashtra. It's not just who controls the state, but who also controls the city of Mumbai, which is more important. And politics in Maharashtra usually, therefore, revolves around the question of who controls Mumbai. Politically, there is also a question about Mumbai always asked, which is that whether Mumbai should belong only to the Marathi-speaking native people of Maharashtra, or it should be a cosmopolitan city. And the politics of Maharashtra, and particularly the politics of Mumbai, basically revolves around this question of nativism or regional identity of the city of Mumbai. Then, as it happens in most states of India, there are at least 2 regions in the state of Maharashtra, sub-regions, which are extremely backward. And therefore, while on the one hand you have a lopsided development of the Mumbai belt, which is both financial hub as also the industrially developed area of Maharashtra. As you move into the state, the center and the eastern parts of the state are backward regions of the state. And therefore, the other theme that dominates the politics of Maharashtra is the sub-regional imbalances and backwardness of some regions in the state of Maharashtra. The third issue is about agriculture. Maharashtra is, in terms of the workforce of Maharashtra, it is primarily in agriculture. But at the same time, we also find that if you look at the state domestic product, it is non-agrarian, which dominates. So this imbalance, as we would see later in a minute, is the recurring question about Maharashtra. While Maharashtra is generally publicized as an industrially developed state, larger workforce of Maharashtra is in agriculture, but agriculture doesn't produce enough income for the state. And that creates an imbalance in the development and working of the social and political processes in the state. And finally, as I would turn to politics, only in the last 20 years or so, the politics of the state has become more competitive than it used to be earlier. And today, as the state government has still changed once more hands from one party to the other, the competitiveness of the politics of the state has been, in a sense, reaffirmed or reasserted once more. So quickly then, the state was formed in 1960. In 1960, because there was a long movement, agitation for the formation of the state on the basis of the language spoken in this region, and through that agitation, the state was formed as an independent political unit within India, or the subnational unit in India. Since 1960, that the state was formed, the politics of the state, in a sense, revolves around 2 or 3 themes, because when the state was formed already, 2 important developments were already happening in the state. One was that in the rural sector particularly, cooperativization was taking place. This cooperativization was not cooperativization of the agriculture, but cooperativization of the agro-industry famously known as the sugar cooperatives in Maharashtra on the one hand, and cooperativization of the rural finance sector, banking in particular. So you have cooperative banks on the one hand and the cooperative sugar factories on the other hand. These cooperatives did two things to Maharashtra. One, they ensured that some resources could flow into the rural areas, and two, they ensured that through the cooperatives, new political recruits would get some kind of a training ground in cooperatives. So cooperatives became, in a sense, the bulwark of political power in the state. And much of the political power of the ruling party at that time, the Congress party, was, in a sense, based in the cooperatives. Most of their leaders and their workers would come from the cooperative sector. So that's one. The other thing which was also happening around the same time, starting 1958, was that local government structures were created, and these were elective structures. And because they were elective structures, yet again, a new social base for the political power of the ruling party could be not only created but consolidated in the rural areas through these local government structures. Both these, the cooperatives on the one hand and the local structures on the other hand, were in a sense coordinated by the ruling party, the Congress party, and in turn the Congress party was controlled and dominated by only one community in the state, the Maratha community. Those who know about India's politics would know that in each state there are 2 or 3 communities known as castes, in fact, 2 or 3 caste groups which dominate the politics of the state. Maharashtra is one of the states where only one community not only has a numerical preponderance, it is something like 30% in the population of the state, but it also controls resources in the rural sector of the state and controlled politics electorally once democratic and electoral politics began in India. So this Maratha dominance in a sense emerges and is coterminous with the dominance of the Congress party. So when you say that the Congress party was dominating Maharashtra for the last 40-50 years, you are also saying that this community, the Maratha community, was dominating both the Congress party and the politics in the state. So it is this conjunction of these 3 or 4 things which really matters or shapes the politics of the state. The Congress party, which was ruling the state, never lost elections till 1995. And that is why, as this slide shows, it was only in 1978 momentarily when there was a split in the Congress party, and as a result of that, a new coalition had come to power. Interestingly then, it also means, this split of 1971 also means that it was a split not only in the Congress party, but a split in the Maratha community's leadership as well. So the leadership split, and as a result of that, some turmoil, some chaos took place in the politics of Maharashtra for a brief period, and it is since then, since 1980 onwards in fact, that the Maratha community started losing its script, it started losing its hegemony over the state as a whole. Finally, in 1990s, the Maratha community and the Congress party started losing grip on the politics of the state, electoral politics of the state, and since 1995, in fact, coalition politics became norm in the state. There were 2 parties that came to power in coalition with each other. The 2 non-Congress parties that came to power were the BJP, which is currently also the ruling party in India, and the Shiv Sena. Shiv Sena is restricted only to the state of Maharashtra. So these 2 parties entered into a coalition, came to power in 1995, but couldn't get re-elected in 1999. By that time, there was yet another split in the Congress party, but in spite of that, the 2 factions or the 2 split sections of the Congress party came together as a coalition since 1999. So it is ironical that the party first splits and then the 2 factions or 2 sections come together as a coalition, 2 members of the coalition, to govern the state. The reason simply is that both the Congress parties, one is known as the Congress and the other is known as the Nationalist Congress Party, the NCP, both have similar concerns. And the similar concerns were that their workers have basically penetrated the cooperative sector and the rural economy. And unless you control the state government, you cannot, in a sense, sustain your control over the rural economy, nor can you sustain control over the rural political scene. So in a sense, as out of compulsion, the two Congress parties came together in 1999, formed a government, and got re-elected twice. So in a sense, the competitive politics of the state of Maharashtra of the last 20-25 years has seen a growing erosion of this dominant community in the politics of the state, the Maratha community. It's only in the recent elections, in this year, 2014, that some momentous changes have happened in the politics of the state. First, in April-May, when the national parliamentary elections took place, the Congress party, not only at the national level, but also in the state, was wiped out, practically wiped out. Maharashtra is a larger state, sending 48 representatives to the national parliament, but only 2 from the Congress party were elected in the parliamentary elections of 2014. The Congress party, in a sense, clearly lost its social base in all sections of the society, including its stronghold, the Maratha community. So the elections of 2014 constitute a major departure, though our studies since 1995 have shown that the backbone of the Congress party, the Maratha community, was getting fragmented, was not supporting the Congress party alone. They were supporting various other political parties in the last 20 years. Now the parliamentary elections clearly show that the Congress party and the NCP, its ally, had completely lost support among the Maratha community. So this is a major change that has happened in the politics of the state, that the community which was seen as coterminous with the Congress party finally deserted the Congress party and the NCP. Quickly following that, assembly elections have taken place, the state legislative elections have taken place last month, and here is something that might interest you. If you look at this, you will find how the different political parties have been faring in the last roughly about 5-6 years, starting 2009, just for the sake of convenience, because 2009 was when the Congress party was re-elected both at the All India level and was re-elected even in the state legislative elections. So this is roughly the percentage of the parties in each of these elections. And it's pathetic. If you look at the final assembly election figures, you will find that the Congress party and the Nationalist Congress party, NCP, have lost not so much in terms of the percentage of votes that they have polled, but then if you look at the BJP, the third row, there the real story lies. That the BJP has improved its vote share from something like 15-16% in 2009 to 27%, 28% in the elections this year. I would also argue, and it is easy to look at this slide and understand the point, that the real change happened in the parliamentary elections, not only in the state assembly elections. So 6 months ago, the change happened. The BJP became ascendant 6 months ago. Before we move further, one interesting detail, however, needs to be noted, which is that these two parties, the Shiv Sena and the BJP, have been allies since 1989. Theirs was therefore one of the longest standing coalition for 25 years. They were together. After the parliamentary elections, when the state elections came, the two parties split ways. They parted company. So this latest election, there were 4 contestants, the 4 parties who contested elections independently. There was no coalition, in a sense, to worth the name. And what has happened is that in spite of splitting, the BJP sustained its momentum, retained its strength from the parliamentary election, and has nearly won the election. They didn't win the election clearly. They didn't completely get clear majority in the state legislature, but they have still managed to form a government. This shows you the social basis of different political parties, and I would suggest that you simply look at the first row. The rest are the details for those who know more about the politics of the state. The rest of the details might interest them. But for my present story, the first row is sufficient. Here is this community which I talked about, the Maratha Kunbi community, which constitutes 30% of the population of the state. Here is a community which is largely agrarian, but also now started moving into urban sectors. Here is a community which dominates not only politics, but rural economics of the state. And after having fragmented since 1990 and 95, now this community has slowly moved towards the Shiv Sena and the BJP from the Congress. So again, the larger point is that they have moved away from the Congress, and this means that the loss that the Congress has experienced in these elections is not a momentary loss that electoral politics usually has, but something more fundamental. And that more fundamental is that the social basis on which the politics of the state and the Congress party was based so long has practically shifted from the Congress to the non-Congress parties, the Shiv Sena and the BJP. The other slightly less important, but probably in the long term very important feature, if you again look at the Congress as a column, you will find that it has practically lost support from all other sections of the society as well. And therefore we can say that truly Maharashtra's politics has moved away from the Congress party in these elections. So this is where we stand today. Maharashtra stands today, is poised for a change. And as Maharashtra is poised for a change, let us quickly therefore look at what are the critical issues in the politics and political economy of the state. Because it is easy to imagine electoral upsets, and in any electoral politics, you win elections or you lose elections maybe after 5 years, maybe after 10 years or 20 years. That's less important. What is important is what are the issues that politics faces. And I would suggest that these are the key issues that the politics of Maharashtra and any government for that matter that comes to power in the state would be facing. Number one, right from the last 25 years or so, there has been brewing some kind of a sectoral imbalance in the state of Maharashtra between agricultural sector and the non-agrarian sector. In a sense, those who know about India's political economy would probably argue that this is not so special about Maharashtra because this is happening in most states of India, that while the workforce, as I started with saying, the workforce is more in agriculture, agriculture doesn't contribute to the economy as much as one would imagine or expect the state's agriculture to do. For example, as far as Maharashtra is concerned, in the state domestic product, SDP, agriculture contributes even less than 12%, whereas more than 55% of the workforce of the state is in agriculture. So the irony is that more than half the workforce is in agriculture, but the contribution of agriculture is not even 12%. So in a sense, a larger imbalance is brewing, and that imbalance also means that there is a deeper agrarian crisis, because it is easy then to imagine that if there is so much of a workforce dependent upon agriculture, agriculture would not be a very economically beneficial occupation. So those engaged in agriculture are primarily small agriculturists, small farmers, and their dissatisfaction, their disappointment is probably a continuing theme in the politics of the state. So agrarian distress. That's the important thing. Some of you might have heard for last 10 years at least, there have been news items about suicides by farmers in the state. But more than the suicides, I think it is the hidden unemployment that the figures of the political economy of Maharashtra show. Because if you look at unemployment figures in Maharashtra, you find that there isn't much unemployment. The reason being that everyone clings to a small piece of land, and therefore they are not technically unemployed. However, in terms of incomes and in terms of distribution of poverty, it becomes a more serious picture as you start looking at agriculture in the state. As a result of that, the Maratha community of which I have been talking has been experiencing a turmoil within, because this community is now facing a question The question is, what is their role both in the society and economy of the state? Those Marathas from the community who have shifted to non-agrarian occupations are doing a little better than those who have been left behind in agriculture. The community is getting stratified, and therefore their politics, as we saw earlier, is also getting fragmented, and they are moving to new political choices or to new political options. I have also spoken of the regional imbalances. These two regions of Maharashtra which are backward, and the present chief minister, the new chief minister of the state, in fact comes from one of these backward regions, from where there is a demand for bifurcation of the state. In the following presentation, my colleague Professor Suri would be speaking about the story of bifurcation of his state and the state of the guest of honor in the morning, Mr. Chandrababu Naidu's state. But in Maharashtra also, there has been a demand that the eastern parts of the state should be created into a new separate state. Now that demand is so far not politically strong. However, the question is not whether the state gets bifurcated or not, but the question is how does the state imagine its political economy and development policies? That's the question. And consistently in the last 25 years at least, the state has simply refused to imagine a balanced economic regional growth of the state. That is the main critical aspect as far as the politics of Maharashtra is concerned. So, in a nutshell, I would be arguing that while apparently speaking, we find that one party is coming to power, a new party is coming to power, something larger is happening. And that something larger is not only pertaining to the ruling community in the state, the Maratha community in the state, which is of course happening, but more than that, it is a crisis of imagination and a crisis of planning. Maharashtra practically doesn't have a robust planned economic development in the last 25 or 30 years. I would argue that because of this lack, there has been no adequate development of the state. So I would stop here with these concluding observations. One, that the state is now at the doorsteps of a new politics because a hegemonic community which controlled the politics of the state has nearly lost its hegemony. That's number one. Number two, while there is more competition among political parties and there is a churning and alternation of political parties, in terms of lack of imagination about the political development and economic development of the state, there is a convergence. All four political parties, the major political parties, have the same imagination of political economy, and as a result of that, we would be facing a series of crises in spite of political alternation. The third thing I would say by way of conclusion is that the political class, parties, have lost control over the economy. They don't control the economy of the state anymore. They don't have the capacity to make decisions, and that is the reason why regional backwardness remains. That is the reason why sectoral imbalance remains. These remain mainly because the political parties, whichever party comes to power, have been, in a sense, slaves of the dominant economic interests, mainly dictated by urban economies in the state. Next, I would also argue that therefore the state is facing a double discontent. It's not that there is a discontent only in the rural areas, but also in the urban areas, which gets expressed through nativist demands from time to time. Therefore, my argument is that what the state requires is not only a change in the ruling parties, which has already happened in a sense, but a change in the imagination of how you plan and implement the political economy of the state. If that doesn't happen, and I'm afraid that is not going to happen even with the political change of guard in the state, then the series of crises that the state is facing would probably only remain there to be handled by the people at large. Thank you.
Most interestingly for me, because coming from the state of Tamil Nadu, which has looked at regional balanced development as a kind of sine qua non of the political parties, two different parties remaining in power, the fact that Maharashtra has in a way neglected this balance is also a very, very important point that has been made. So,
first of all, I am grateful for inviting me to this institute and asking me to speak before you. And I think whatever I would say in the next 20, 25 minutes, the setting has been prepared by the Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh, Chandrababu Naidu, and also the presentation made by Professor Palshika. Towards the end of his presentation, he was speaking of the problems of formation of Vidarbha state, whether Maharashtra would be also is the next state for bifurcation. So I think that provides me a kind of background to what I would speak now. And also thirdly, I just saw Professor Palshika's presentation as a dynamics of Maharashtra politics. I called it dynamics of state formation. Chandrababu Naidu was speaking of change. Professor Mehta yesterday spoke of transformation. I think we are using certain words of transformation, transition, change, dynamic. I think this word, the change, the dynamic, because the words which we are using connote a situation, a condition which is not static, which is changing. And you know, it is very difficult to understand a thing that is changing. It is easy to understand a thing that is static. Something that changes, you will never understand. Because the moment you say something, it is no more that. This is a philosophical problem that Indians faced from times immemorial. That because you don't understand anything that is changing, all is illusion. So we only grab with illusion because what you say is not correct by the time you say, because the thing has changed already. Had I been here 3 months ago, I would be speaking of United State of Andhra Pradesh. And if I were here, say in June, there were no two states. And in standing here before you in November, I speak of two states, not one state. When Rahul Mukherjee invited me to write a paper, I was thinking of United Andhra Pradesh. And by the time I come here, I am standing of a erstwhile undivided Andhra Pradesh now into two states called Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. However, even the word state itself is quite kind word. I don't understand the meaning of state completely even today. And not I'm thinking of a kind of juridical meaning of state and a kind of a geographical provincial meaning of the state. But state itself is a condition of a thing. And if you think of India as a state in a juridical sense, and if you think of India in terms of a conjury of states, a kind of a cluster of states that have come together. And even today, I don't have a correct word to think of these different words in English, like state, nation, province, state in that Indian state, Indian nation, Indian country. What is a country? What is a nation? What is a region? What is a province? We do not know, because some of the provinces are fighting for an independent state in India. Let's say Jammu Kashmir. Or Punjab fought for an independent state. The Punjab state was fighting for an independent state in a different sense till recently. And in the Northeast, some insurgency is going on still. Some Northeastern states don't want to be, some of them, they want to secede. Yet there is something called India. And this India has been changing. And that's how India has been changing is, I will speak today in the context of the formation of two states called Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. Now, if you look at India, when I was born, the map of India was completely different. 10 years before I was born, the map of India was completely different. When the British left India in 1947, this was the map. And today, none of these states that existed in 1947 exist now, in the same, either with the same name or with the same boundaries or with the same territories inside. Well, we can understand that there were about 556 native states at the time, and there were a large number of British provinces. And these were all integrated, these were all brought together. These 556 states were brought into India. They were merged with some of the provinces that already existed. Some of them were merged and were created into separate states. So there were by 1950, when Indian Constitution was adopted, or 1949 November, when the Indian Constitution was adopted, which came into effect in 1950, January 26, the map of India was completely changed. That was in 1950, when new states were created, boundaries were completely changed, and there were 4 categories of states. They were called A, B, C, D types. And after 10 years, all those states were dismantled by 1956-57, and new states were created, what we call States Reorganization Act. And then these 4 categories were done away with, and two categories of one category of states were created, states and union territories. So there is only one category of states now, states. That's where we are. And between 1956, when the States Reorganization Act was passed by the Parliament, by creating a new type of states, by 2014, today, if you look at 1947, 1950, when the states were created, 1956, when the States Reorganization was done, to 2014, the map of India had changed so much that I cannot imagine of any state in India which remained intact. So the name of the state or the territories of the state, they have undergone a great, say, transformation or alteration. Probably I have to use another word, maybe alteration. Every alteration may not be transformation, but a change. And why it happens in India like this? In the morning, somebody was saying, Indian nation. We are not talking of Indian nation, we are talking of Indian states today in this conference. But the problem is, there are many nations in India. Bengalis think that they are a nation. Tamilians think that they are a nation. There's nothing wrong in that, because the word nation means something else to me. I think Telugus are a different nation, or Maharashtrians are a different nation. And it is when several nations come together, that is India. It is a nation of nations, what some people call a multinational nation, or a multinational society. Now, how do you imagine a multinational nation? There is no parallel to India. It is not the size that is important. I don't think size is very crucial. China is also a very large nation, larger than India in terms of population. But in terms of diversity, I think no other nation comes close to it. It's not like Singapore, where you have several people of several national origins are living together. like a finely woven fabric. India is not a finely woven fabric. It is a mosaic of the different components brought together. It is not even a mosaic because mosaic has a long life. You cannot take out a piece from a mosaic. It is like a quilt. You can tear off a piece and then cut it into two and then again stitch it. India, I think, is a multicolored with different patches, like a quilt, whose colors can change, whose the pieces that constitute the quilt can be taken out, cut into different shapes, and then again stitched back. So that's what India is. I think the nearest parallel to imagine the kind of states formation in India is something like Europe. Soviet Union was together, it broke into 13 nations. And Yugoslavia was together, it was broken into 5 nations. Czechoslovakia was together, Czech and Slovakia, they came into existence. Probably India is like what is happening in Europe is something happening in India. What happened in Europe over the last 200 years is happening in India over the last 50 years. And the formation of Telangana state, I think, is not just formation of another state, but it is crucial because it marks, I think, a slightly different stage of Indian politics. State formation in India goes back to the British times. It was the British which started creating what we today consider to be the modern provinces and states. Linguistic states are also not new to India. They have been there. Orissa was a linguistic state in 1936 under the British rule itself. Bengal was more or less a kind of a linguistic state even under the British rule. But others were composite states. So linguistic states are not something new to India after independence. State formation is not something new to India. It has been happening from the time of, at least in the recent period, from the colonial times. But what is new with the creation of Telangana, I think, is the first time that the basis of the formation of a state in India that has come to be accepted for the last 50 years has been broken. Because for about 50 years now, that is 1956 State Reorganization Act to 2014, when Telangana was created recently, 3 months ago, the foundational principle has been accepted that for all non-Hindi speaking people, common language is the standard, or is the principle on which a state can be formed in India. You have Tamil Nadu, you have Kerala, you have Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Gujarat, Punjab, Orissa. These are the states, major states, where different languages are spoken. These languages are not dialects. These are massive languages which have massive literature for a very, very long time, maybe for several centuries. They are very well-developed languages. Conceptualization takes place for many, at least for most people like me, in my own language. Though I speak Telugu, but much of my thinking process takes place in my own language. Our minds are not completely colonized in that sense, although we still speak and write and communicate in English. So these languages are very crucial for most Indians. And today, with the formation of Telangana, this principle of forming states in India among non-Hindi people on the basis of language is, I think, broken. And I think this signifies probably a new stage of Indian federation. We know that Indian federation is not the federation like the United States. It is not like federation like Nigeria. Nigeria has changed the boundaries of its country very frequently. United States has never changed the boundaries of its states, although it acquired new states, but the old states' boundaries were never changed. They were fixed and permanent, static. And you have an example like Nigeria where it is not static at all. Or maybe in Germany, where several new states have come, have been, some old were there and some new were created. But Indian Federation, I think what is today happening is that we are moving to a different stage where we have to search for a principle of organization of states in India. That was anxiety for many, those who were, because the Telangana creation preoccupied the nation for almost 10 years, more in Andhra Pradesh, of course. And, it had to be, the state had to be bifurcated in a most difficult situation. In the parliament, the mics were switched off, the media was switched off. Nobody knew how the bill was passed. And there was complete pandemonium, and the speaker said the bill was passed. And that was the tough situation through which India, and it just happened in 2-3 months, although the problem was there for a very long time. To just tell you the few details, the state of Andhra Pradesh had a long history, as Chandrababu Naidu was saying that it's a history. I don't know whether he said it meant it is a history, Andhra Pradesh is a history, or it has a long history. Andhra was a part of composite Madras state. It was called a presidency during the British times. There were certain presidencies and there were certain provinces. Bengal, Mumbai, Bombay, and Madras were the 3 presidencies under the colonial rule. And Andhra was a part of Madras presidency. I should say that some Telugu-speaking people were part of Madras presidency. Some Telugu-speaking people were part of Hyderabad state. There was a princely state called Hyderabad, which was founded by the Subedar of the Mughal emperor, who rebelled against Mughal emperor and declared independence and formed his own state, Hyderabad, Deccan. Then it continued under the Muslim rule for about 500 years. So Hyderabad consisted of 3 linguistic regions, people who spoke Marathi, people who spoke Kannada, and people who spoke Telugu. And after independence, a part of Madras presidency, which became a Madras state after independence, a part of Madras state was taken out, was carved out, and was formed into a separate state in 1953 called Andhra. Yeah. And then a part of Telangana was taken out, that is Telugu-speaking territory of Hyderabad state was taken out, and these 2 were merged. Andhra and Hyderabad were merged to form what was called Andhra Pradesh. That was in 1956. There were 2 agitations, one in 1969 in the Telangana region, saying that we don't want to be in the United States, we want to go out and have our own state. And there was also an agitation in Andhra region, saying that we want to be separate, and there was a separatist agitation in Andhra. But Mrs. Gandhi stood firm, saying that she was not interested. She thought that it would be a great disaster for the country to split a linguistic state in India. Again, the movement came in 1990, which culminated in the bifurcation of Andhra Pradesh in 2014. I would only say 2-3 things here. Now, there are two sets of arguments for the separatist demand of creating Telangana. Some people say that it is the regional backwardness or inter-regional disparities. The Telangana region, like Vidarbha region in Maharashtra, was more backward. And because this backwardness bred a separatist feeling or sentiment among people of Telangana. There is a second argument is that the people of Andhra, who were more prosperous, better educated, because they were under British rule for a long time, and they had fertile lands, surpluses, etc. They, when after the merger in 1956, dominated Telangana people. So they turned Telangana into a colony for Andhra, what is internal colonialism. So although British colonialism has gone, there came colonialism within the state, one people of one territory colonizing others. A third argument is that it is the people's aspirations for greater education and employment. It is a deprivation or lack of access to education and employment that bred this agitation for a separate statehood. I think they are not correct. It is neither the regional backwardness, it is nor the colonialism or access for education and employment that were primarily responsible for dividing the state. I would think of 3 reasons which led to the bifurcation of the state. One is, it is actually the development that led to the bifurcation. And in the last 50 years, the region that benefited most because of integration in 1956 was the Telangana region. All indicators, they show that Telangana region, the districts of Telangana, benefited much more than other districts. Now, this has a consequence. I believe, and the studies world over tells me, that it is not deprivation that leads to protest. It is not poverty that leads to rebellion. It is not deprivation that leads to alienation. It is actually the development and the hope for greater development, hope for greater prosperity that makes people to rebel. It is a comparison that you make with others who are better developed. Then you tell yourself that I want to be like you. And since I cannot be like you, when we are together, I want to go away. I think that kind of a logic worked here. Since now I have developed, but my free development is now not possible under this, integrated state, we need a separate state. I think that has contributed a great deal. A second thing is a kind of a memory, historical memory, has contributed, because Hyderabad existed for about 400, 500 years as a separate state. Now Hyderabad people wanted, because they were suppressed by the Nizam, and when they were liberated and merged with India, they didn't get an opportunity to rule on their own. A third factor is Hyderabad was located in Telangana. When Hyderabad developed, I think Chandrababu Naidu was saying that he developed Hyderabad like anything, but that also caused a problem. And Hyderabad was in Telangana, and now Telangana people said, let us have it. And actually, it's not the separate state of Telangana that was created in 2014 June, it was Andhra Pradesh that is created, because Andhra Pradesh had to go out. Although it inherited the name, became successor state, it is actually the Telangana, the old state existed, it is Andhra Pradesh which went out without a capital. I think these are the my few observations, and I think that Indian nation is ever changing, and it is in the process of formation. And because of this, the internal boundaries are getting redrawn again, and again. And there is no finality to this process. This will go on for a few more decades. Indian Federation is in the process of evolving. And I think we are working out ways and means through which we organize ourselves in terms of constituent units, the relations between constituent units, and the relations between constituent units and the central state. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak to you.